Kia ora koutou. No mai haere mai to this month's hot take. My name is Ayla and I am an SBN staff member and run these hot take sessions. This month is a little bit different and super exciting. We're talking to 4 different young disruptors, as we've named them. We'll see how one of the questions about how they feel about that title. But we came up with this idea coming up to election time and hearing lots about what young people are feeling in the kind of lead up to the election, but also just young people feeling about what business is doing in all these different areas that they really care about. So we wanted to get a range of different people to kind of share some opinions, and I hope you're all as excited as I am to hear the different kind of points of view we have today, and we're going to cover a range of subjects. So, sorry, just admit the next few little lot of people. There we go. So how these sessions run, if you haven't attended a hot take before, is we want it to feel, even though we're online, like we're all in a room together. So please feel free to get interactive once we open up to Q&A. We have a few questions we've kind of laid out for the panel. So we'll get into those, but that will take about half our time, and then we can jump into any questions from the audience. So you're most welcome as we go through. If there's something someone says that sparks a question, you can pop it in the chat and I'll get to it, or you are also welcome to be really brave and put your video on and unmute yourself and ask out loud and interact with our panel. So, perfect, we've got lots of people all joined in there now. So yeah, we wanted to kind of invite some people to talk about the systems and if they're working for us and what's not working for us, and specifically from this position of rangatahi and our young distributors. So what I'm going to start with is just getting a bit of a introduction from our panel, and then also asking them, what does being a disruptor look like to you? So I'll go to each of you, but if we could kick off with Quack.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Quack Pirihi tōku ingoa, from Te Tai Tōkiro ki Ngapu, ki Ngati Wai, ki Ngati Parau, Ngati Whātua, Kaipara. And I'm from a little best place in Aotearoa called Takahiwai. I'm a cheeky rangatahi Māori activist, kaupapa Māori practitioner, blah, blah, blah. And being a disruptor looks like it's different in a lot of different spaces. As a rangatahi, I never like to follow things like uniform or dress codes, because everyone else is wearing suits and ties, and that's not accessible for a rangatahi to engage in, especially when it comes to climate activism. That's a huge barrier. But being a disruptor looks like a lot of swearing, a lot of making the adults in the room feel uncomfortable with the conversations that you're wanting to host. And like finding those pressure points or those comforts that different climate initiatives has built for themselves, and really like digging through them and asking those out the gate pātai. I want people to look at questions that I say or ask and think, did they just really say that? And that's what being a young disruptor is for me.
Fantastic, thank you, Quack. Next I'll pass to Shaheen. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora koutou, ko Shaheen Najik tōku anua. I'm based in Te Whanganui Atara, and I am a 23-year-old activist focused on grassroots climate action responses and increasing representation for people of colour. So to me, being a disruptor means echoing what Quack had just said, and then also putting yourself in situations where you can learn and absorb as much as you can, and then taking that information and making it accessible and easy to understand to other youth and to other rangatahi, so that they can also join the conversation and be part of the journey with you. Thanks.
Awesome, thank you, Shaheen. And then I'll go to Dylan.
Kia ora koutou, ko Dylan Henson aho. My name's Dylan, and I'm based in Nelson, an outdoor educator working for Outbound. Yeah, disruptor, I think for me, a disruptor is a critical thinker that understands their own values and is brave enough to ask why in a public setting. And, you know, there's probably a timing element to that as well. You might have all been sitting in meetings or whether that be in the staff room, and there's people that maybe more outspoken than others, but a disruptor for me is someone who understands and is able to read a room, knows what they believe in, and is brave enough to question the status quo and ask what probably a lot of people are thinking. Yeah, that's what a disruptor is for me.
Kia ora, Dylan. Thank you. And to round out our awesome panel for today, I'll leave it to Caitlyn to finish up this question.
Yeah, tēnā koutou katoa, ko inangangi te whakapapa mai, ko waimaiku me whangaparaua te whenua tupu no tāmaki me kaurua hau, ko Caitlyn Prince toku ingoa, tēnā tātou katoa. So my name's Caitlyn. I've grown up in Tāmaki, Makaurau my whole life, and I've had some stints here and there in Wellsford and Morrinsville. So if you're from there, kia ora. I'm a young person that's really concerned about my future, but also the future of our descendants. I don't believe that poverty, mental health, and the climate crisis and all other issues under that umbrella are always going to be there or are too complex to solve. I believe that they're political choices and products of systems that we as humans have designed. So we have the power to change them if we take up the opportunity. So I guess for me, a disruptor means challenging those in decision-making positions, challenging my friends, challenging my family and whānau. I didn't always believe what I believed, and I believe that everyone has the potential to change and to believe that there's more to life than just profit, than just working until you retire. And so any opportunity that I can, I try to remind people that we are a collective, we're a part of history, and we should be acting from that place. And if you think of that from a different perspective, we exchange around 98% of our atoms with the people and environment around us every year. So I am you and you are me.
Kia ora, Caitlyn. What lovely answers from you all, and shows what, you know, a disruptor can be a really diverse term, and we've tried to have quite a range of you to kind of give us all those different perspectives, which is super exciting. Just before we move on to the next question, because we've had a couple of people join, I'll just remind you that there'll be lots of time for questions from the audience, so feel free to pop them in the chat, or when I open up to the floor you can ask them out loud. But next I'm going to ask, he aha te kaupapa, what is the intention and motivation behind what you do? So you're welcome to dive into your real worky professional life, but also what just is that motivation kind of personally for you. And Dylan, if I can ask you to start, please.
Yeah, thanks, Ayla. So, you know, I'm lucky enough to move from an instructing role to sustainability and research lead. So focusing on how Outward Bound can be more sustainable and what's our journey going to be. And I think for me, whether this be in the workplace or even at a dinner table, car ride with a friend, you know, whenever you hear that word sustainability, it doesn't just mean the capacity to endure. You know, there's issues associated with that. You know, whether they be biodiversity issues, you know, socioeconomic things, climate change, climate resilience. You know, that word brings up a lot of things, and it's great, those topics to talk about, but there's also a lot of other stuff that comes with those kinds of topics. Like when you say sustainability, there can sometimes be a confusing and intimidating and even polarizing aspect or feeling that people get when we talk about sustainability. And so what kind of motivates me is, you know, how do we really engage people in sustainability? I think that's probably a really important barrier to get across. And, you know, what success looks like is if we had a group of people, for me and Outward Bound, or our staff, feels not so polarized in talking about sustainability or intimidated, but actually they feel inspired that our workplace has a mission in sustainability, and they feel capable and clear in their roles what sustainable practice means for them. So that's probably the big motivator for me, is breaking down those scary barriers and trying to simplify it down so that they know what they should be doing.
Kia ora, Dylan. Thank you for that. Shaheen, would you like to answer that one next?
Sure. I think ever since I was little, I've had a very strong connection to the environment, starting with a very weird obsession as a 5-year-old with volcanoes. It's only grown since then. That kind of pushed me through my undergrad. And as I went through university, I started to draw links between environmental science and economics. We're always going to keep coming back to our GDP as our core growth measure and metric, but there needs to be a way for us to understand the impact of what we're doing on our natural environment, and a way for us to continue developing in a way that is sustainable without creating a long-term cost for the generations that come after us. And that sort of fueled me in my work. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much, Shaheen. And Caitlyn, over to you next.
Yeah, kia ora. I think the intention and motivation that I have behind what I do is I want to be a part of the solution. So yeah, we've got the necessary resources and structures that we could use to transform our systems to guarantee that we actually have a regenerative future. We just need to start the process. And I think not just in my professional life, but also in my personal life, I want to be able to share my knowledge, skills, and time to anyone that's seeking to build their capacity to, be a part of that. And I mean, I've got a lot of privilege. I'm a child free with a stable job, so if I can contribute that to the community, that's really important to me. And also as a tangata tiriti Pākehā, so as a treaty partner, it's also my responsibility, I think, to be uplifting and working alongside Māori, tangata whenua, mana whenua, to uphold their aspirations. So that's why I'm here and doing what I do. And if for a bit of context, Indigenous populations make up 3% of the world's population, but yet hold 80% of what's left of our biodiversity. So to put that in perspective, it's actually what is best for our environment as well.
Kia ora. Thank you, Caitlyn. And then to round out that question, Quack, over to you.
Hi, I'm loving all these very elegant and well thought out answers. I think what motivates me is just a sense of like existential dread. And if we don't make change, oh well, we're all gonna die at some point. I think working with rangatahi who have had to have really real conversations with themselves and their whānau and their iwi about moving their marae more inland due to, I don't know, erosion, the corrosion of the coastal of our coastal waters, or having conversations about like which part of their whenua they have to sell to developers in order to sustain the health and well-being of their iwi, is a very real situation and scenario that we're dealing with in Te Ao Māori. We know that the health of the whenua reflects the health of the people, and when we look at the political landscape that we're in, and all of the injustice that's been brought on to tangata whenua and to tangata tiriti alike, we can make connections between the pain we're feeling as well as the pain the whenua and Papatuānuku and Ranginui is feeling. I think if I didn't care about anyone but myself, then it would be so much easier to just sit back at home or like tap this one out and not get engaged any further with the climate crisis. But it's my responsibility as a cheeky rangatahi Māori, as tangata whenua, to protect the tangata and the whenua. That's what motivates me: fear, anger.
Kia ora. Thank you, everybody. Really lovely to hear those different positions, and I like that engage kind of came across quite a lot, whether that's from yourself or engaging other people, but that's, yeah, a key part of a lot of this work as well, hey? So our next question, how do you hold true to your sense of purpose and identity amongst the increasing and often conflicting expectations and pressure that exist for you as a young people in your industry? That one's a little bit of a mouthful, but definitely that idea of like young people are feeling the pressure. We're often pointed to lead things within organizations because we are louder sometimes about stuff, but yeah, how do you kind of hold on to that? And we're going to start with Caitlyn and then open up to the floor.
Yeah, kia ora. I find this is a really tough question for myself to answer because it's definitely something I'm still figuring out myself. But I feel like I do have a strong sense of identity and purpose, but but when I'm in the room with people that are putting expectations or pressure on young people, I do find myself exaggerating parts of myself to become more palatable. And I think as soon as I'm seen as too passionate or too radical, people kind of just immediately, I see the shift of them devaluing my opinion and stopping actively listening to what I have to say. So I challenge you all to keep an open mind throughout this panel. And I think the way that I hold true to who I am is by actually just practicing being assertive and not diluting myself to make others feel comfortable. And I want to maintain my integrity and actually build connections with people from the place that's authentic for me, so that it feels more of a meaningful connection. Because I am just a human. I do just want to be valued and understood. And also, obviously, spending time in nature always gives me the strength and reminds me that I can stand up for what I believe in.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you, Caitlyn. And nice as well to, people in the audience who have diverse workforces, taking that with you as well to think about, how do you value all the different opinions in the room and make sure they feel that. Does anyone from the panel want to add to that question? Have anything to say?
I've got some Pākehā I'd like to share. I found looking when I turn up to kaupapa, depending on the location and the type of the demographic of people that are there, sometimes I've no choice but to put my queerness and whakatapuitanga to the side in order to engage in kaupapa. We know that colonisation had a devastating impact on the way that queer people and traditional Māori queer identities, such as whakatapui, are viewed in te ao Māori. We know that there are many whānau or kaumātua who don't believe that queerness existed pre-colonisation, despite our motiatia, our karakia, our whakairo, and our waiata all insisting that we did. And so when I turn up to a kaupapa, in order, especially if it's a climate action kaupapa, sometimes it's more important to look at the immediate issue of the fact that we need to mobilise our Māori communities and our rangatahi Māori through whatever action we're planning at this wānanga, instead of me jumping on my pedestal and being able to be open and talk about how my takatapuitanga influences my climate action, because then you'd get some whānau just switch off due to their learned, takatapi phobia, homophobia. And that's been something really interesting to manage. Sometimes I haven't had the option to be authentically myself when it comes to working in wānanga spaces. But alongside that, I've been in many spaces in the marae where we've been able to speak freely and openly about the nuance of being takatapui and a climate activist, and growing up with no pitia and growing up disconnected from their whenua. It's my whakaaro.
Kia ora, Quack. Thank you for adding to that. Shaheen or Dylan, anything to add, or shall we go to the next question?
Yeah, I can talk to this and agree with Caitlyn and Quack and those different pressures that we feel on a day-to-day. We talk a little bit at Outward Bound about what mask we're wearing. That can change from who you talk to or what you're doing. A real pragmatic example of this question is, if we take it, kind of look at it a little philosophically, is how can you be a climate activist if you are flying overseas, or how can you advocate for sustainability in your role when it's hard to understand what sustainability looks like in your organization? And you ask, how do you hold true to your sense of purpose? What's important for us is to understand what our mission really is, and really understand what our values are as an organization and how we can illustrate that on an individual level. Doing a bit of reflection on what's important to you, I think, is a really important thing to do kind of periodically.
I might jump in, but I think as a young person, it's really important to acknowledge that your capacity is going to change at different times, and that there's also a lot of guilt that comes with saying no to opportunities or saying no to running certain work streams. But it's important to acknowledge that climate burnout and climate anxiety are all very real, and sometimes you need to be able to take a step back, not feel guilty for saying no, and be able to ground yourself again in order to keep yourself healthy and to make sure that the work remains sustainable, because burning yourself out isn't going to help anyone in the long run, and it's going to be you that's going to feel the consequences.
Yeah, definitely great point to finish there. Lovely round answers again, team. Next thing we were looking at covering is, how do you see yourself making space for other rangatahi in your industry? And how do we enable more rangatahi to feel empowered as disruptors of the status quo? This is a great one as well, because we often have young people, especially if they work in larger organizations, having questions around this sort of like, I have strong opinions, but in that meeting, I guess it's a bit of like what you guys talked about, masking or feeling that you have to dull that voice to be respected, or feel that you're being even respectful to the people in the organization. So Shaheen, could we get you to start your opinion on that question?
Sure. I guess the way that I'd sort of see activism and leadership is that it's an invitation for others to act. So in that space, it's really important about making sure that there is proper representation, that everyone's voices feels heard and acknowledged, and they feel comfortable and safe enough to have those conversations in a space. And it's about cultivating those spaces where they feel free to do that. So that's kind of the work with the Youth Climate Collective. I think it's also acknowledging that it is a privilege, being able to be in these spaces and to be able to share your opinion and to be heard. And it's always a team effort. Like, it's never just one person. It's always a multitude of people from different streams, from different backgrounds, and it's acknowledging that. I wouldn't be here if I didn't have had the support that I originally had when I first started out. And I think if I can make things easier for the person that comes after me, then I definitely will. Because that's how it's going to stay sustainable, and that's how we're going to meet those long-term goals and dealing with these big crises coming forward.
Kia ora. Thank you, Shaheen. Anyone want to add on to that?
I think I just want to add like a little practical thing that, like if you are in a senior leadership position, or if you're in an organization, always ask the question of how you can invite rangatahi to get involved and how they might like to be involved in your kaupapa. And also, if you are in a senior leadership position, always asking the opinion of your staff. I think often if they are too scared, they will have some really good ideas, but they might just be taking a back seat for fear of,
Yeah, that's a great point to add on, Caitlyn. And checking in, sometimes you do see businesses wanting to interact with rangatahi, which is great, but then they sometimes overlook a huge proportion of staff who fit that category as well. So how do you do both and make those safe spaces so people feel that they can be heard? Quack, did you want to add on there?
I just wanted to ask the society to stop, if we could stop making youth advisory groups for our organizations, unless we have the capacity and the resource to manage it impactfully and effectively for the rangatahi, as well as listen to what these rangatahi are saying. I see a lot of them start up, and a lot of drive and passion come from rangatahi wanting to help support the initiative, the kaupapa, help grow the kaupapa to better work for rangatahi Māori, and then management is unable to prioritize it as a part of their, work ecology, work framework. That's my only other 2 cents. There are other meaningful ways to engage rangatahi in the work that you're doing. And it doesn't look like you making them come to your table. You go out to them and you talk to them and you share your learnings and findings and offer opportunities for them to embrace sustainability or kaitiakitanga or
Yeah, great. Thank you. Shall we move to the next question, which is, what is front of mind for you this election? And Caitlyn, shall we start with you, since we know you have lots of political knowledge?
Yes, it's a really good question, and I think our world needs courageous, ambitious, and sensitive leadership. And that's the role that we all must play. I think it's also not just leadership's not reserved just for our CEOs or our politicians, and it isn't deserved by that title alone. Leadership is the ability to weave us together, to uplift others' strengths, and to also listen compassionately to everyone around them. So I think if you can all lead by that example and cast your vote being informed by bold and evidence-based climate and social policies, because the intersection between those two are really critical. And I challenge you to practice this beyond the election. So connect to your local marae, connect to your local community initiatives, and actually be of service to them.
Kia ora, Caitlyn. Rest of the panel, front of mind this election.
For Quack, it's definitely taking action against the climate crisis in ways that acknowledges how interconnected all of our societal issues are, especially for tangata whenua. And I feel like I'm preaching a little bit to the choir, but just understanding the connection, the health of the whenua has to the health of the people, and the success of our people through education, through holding jobs, through being able to own a house, through being able to live comfortably. So many different movements, and a lot of them have been done by tangata whenua leading the movement for not just liberating tangata whenua, but also ngā tangata katoa, everybody. And I just wanted to mahi to all the kaimahi Māori working in organisations trying to push for more liberal outcomes, I suppose, or more just outcomes, which go one and the same these days.
Kia ora, Quack. Shaheen or Dylan, anything to add there?
Yep. I think probably the biggest thing for me that stood out, or what's front of mind in this election, is the difficulty it is to get a bit more depth in the issues that our party leaders are talking to. And what I mean by that is it's really easy to jump on Facebook, jump on stuff, and jump on these social media streams, and you see almost sensationalist statements, and they have a huge influence on the voter, and it's quite hard to dig to really get a deeper understanding of what each party wants. And even if you look at YouTube and you want to find a debate to hear what the party leaders are talking about, it's really hard to understand exactly the why behind a position or policy, and so that's been front of mind for me as a voter. And when I hear conversations or talk to friends or talk to people in the schools, if you ask, why do you support X, Y, or Z party, it's usually because of maybe something that they've read or conversations they've had in their groups. But so a goal for me has been to go a bit deeper and understand the why behind people's opinions, and see if they know, and ask that same question myself: do I really know why I'm voting for this person? Yeah, that's probably been the biggest issue, and it's kind of created a bit of a stagnation in which minority party I'm going to be supporting.
Kia ora, Dylan. I fully agree. It's really interesting when you do open up those conversations with people, and what influences them can be such a tiny detail that they've heard, and especially in, people are generally pretty time poor to be digging through a whole heap of information, so it can be really influential what's shared on social media. Kia ora. Shaheen?
I don't think we're quite at the stage where we're having a climate election. I don't think we've seen that this time, but I do think in the next 3 years, we probably will reach that stage. So it's important about thinking the long-term consequences of the proposed policies, because that's going to shape our response going forward. And it is, as Dylan said, it's very hard to kind of pick up on that information because it is not readily available, and it does require some critical thinking. But while it can look really good on the surface, it's important about thinking of the long-term consequences and the impacts that could come from the implementation of some of the policies put forward.
Kia ora. And if anyone from the panel or the audience has any amazing resources they've come across, please feel free to share them with the chat, and I can also pop them in follow-up emails for people to have a look at. Cool, okay. So what are your thoughts around the narratives we're hearing around systems change right now? Systems change is obviously a term that is quickly becoming really overused potentially, or just hearing it everywhere without necessarily the understanding from people of what they mean when they say that. So Caitlyn, shall we kick off with you?
Yep. Yeah, so I'm going to focus on kind of what the narrative we need to kind of build the foundations for our future. And I think the one that sticks out for me at the moment is the need to move from it's my human right to it's my human responsibility. So instead of saying it's my human right to do X, it's actually my human responsibility to do climate action. And I think a critical narrative for Aotearoa, again speaking as someone who is tangata tiriti Pākehā, a European treaty partner, is that by supporting and sharing our resources with Māori and uplifting their aspirations, we are actually strengthening the bonds of our community. We're healing history, and we are guaranteeing that our nation will be the most biodiverse and climate resilient it possibly could be. We don't need to feel insecure about our role or feel paralyzed by the past. We can choose a better future now. And I want to be an ancestor that my descendants can actually take inspiration and strength from. So I don't do it just for my own glory. I'm doing it because it's what's right, and it's also what our world needs. So that's the narrative I'm holding to.
Kia ora, Caitlyn. Anyone else want to add their thoughts on this systems change term we're hearing a lot of?
I've got some whakaaro again. I think it's fascinating dropping the C word, the co-governance word. We've seen co-governance across many different public government agencies for a very long time, and I think the fear-mongering that we're seeing from the right has a direct impact on whether political parties will get into government that want to take genuine and meaningful action against the climate crisis that we're experiencing. I think there are so many different Māori initiatives when it comes to tackling the health of our waterways, the health of our people. I know there are many initiatives up here in Tāmaki that want to support young parents or parents wanting to get off smoking. And all of these issues aren't able to be spoken about because the far right or the media want to keep talking about this one buzzword. And so I think the impact these narratives have around particularly co-governance and Māori leadership, or by Māori for Māori approaches to different social issues, disregards the fact that what works for Māori will work for all. And it also doesn't allow us to spotlight or really amplify some of the really cool initiatives that our iwi organizations are doing, that our Māori run organizations are doing. And I know from experience up in Tāmaki, not all iwi organizations are perfect, and not all iwi organizations have the capacity or the resources to do everything in the best way possible. But I know that there's so much beautiful work that's being done. And that's, I think, the impact these conversations around system changes has on our ability to be kaitiaki.
Kia ora, Quack. Shaheen or Dylan? Systems change from any different perspective? I know it's used in lots of different contexts. Shaheen?
Okay, I thought Dylan was going to go, but I'm not sure.
I thought you were going to go first.
We'll start with Shaheen, then I'll pass to you, Dylan.
I think be mindful of buzzwords: systems change, co-governance, sustainability. I think they're being used more and more, but the issue is it's kind of being used in a tokenistic framing. It's a surface level change. It's not actually a system-wide change, and that's very important to make that distinction. There are definitely cases that we're seeing where there are systems change coming through in New Zealand, but I think particularly in election time, it's just something to be mindful of, is that while you can say those words, there's not always a strong understanding of what those words mean.
Thank you. And Dylan?
Yeah, I'd agree with that too. And I think when we think of things like system change, it's easy to put it out in the ether and look at and not really make it relevant to, say, what you're doing on a day-to-day. And so, for outward bound, I'd argue what system change looked like for us is, or the problem behind a similar kind of issue around systems changes. We've got our day-to-day of, this is our goal, which is to run courses that makes better people and inspires people. But then how do we connect with the kaupapa of sustainability, and how do we change what we're doing in our workplace to make sure that we're part of that sustainability journey that we're being asked to do by the global community. And for me, what's important here is that sustainability can't just be an ad hoc position in a workplace. People need to understand what sustainability means for their roles and what the goalposts are to define whether or not they're doing that really well. And if you don't have that, then system change does become a buzzword. If you're not able to figure out, if I'm an instructor or maybe I'm someone in the enrollment team, you don't understand what sustainability is for them, then there isn't going to be a change, and sustainability will always be pushed in the corner. So, that's probably the thing that we're focused on in our workplace is, figuring out what we're actually supposed to be doing to make sure we're having it.
Kia ora, Dylan. I think that's a really nice place to take that as well, especially relevant when I'm talking to businesses at the moment who are struggling, and there's the economics on top of that at the moment that has meant a lot of people have used this as a buzzword, and maybe it's not necessarily that they don't want it to be front of mind, but paying staff and things comes beforehand a lot of times. So how do you balance those things and make sure you're still actively doing them both at the same time? It's a tricky moment. That leads on very nicely to our next question, which is, what is one action you think businesses should take right now? And so, Dylan, since you kind of led into that, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thanks, Ayla. So I've gotten in my role as sustainability and research lead. It's quite new, and I've found a lot of support through networking. I think with this kind of role, it's a relatively new one in the world of kind of the workforce sustainability or environmental officers. And so I think if sustainability is a journey that you want to go through, communicating and talking with other organizations as to where to start is a really good place. That helped me. But the second piece is understanding what your organization's role is in sustainability. What's your organization's mission? The way that we did that was we did two things. We looked at our carbon footprint, and we have a pretty small carbon footprint compared to other organizations, which are for a place that runs outdoor education courses with 60 staff, you do have a small carbon footprint, and that kind of feels insignificant. But then, so we've got that, and then we also looked at our handprint, which is, what's our big mission? And that big mission for us was, what can we bolster more people to be connected with nature? Can we create more environmental responsibility with our students? And can we get people to understand a little more about what sustainability means? And that was a big motivator for our organizations. So utilize private relationships and networks, and then understand what your company's mission is.
Kia ora, Dylan. Shaheen, do you want to add on to that from a business perspective?
Sure. I guess for me, I've got two points. The first one is be transparent. We're slowly starting to see a shift towards ethical consumerism, and consumers want to know whether you're tracking your emissions, what your supply chain and labor practices look like. What is your uptake of digital technologies? How are you planning on reducing waste on your physical sites? I mean, even if you are making slow progress, it's still a step in the right direction, and consumers will respond to that. And I think social media is a really big tool in terms of transparency. We've seen waves where larger multinational firms have come under fire because someone's realized that they're doing unethical practices and it's gone viral and they've been affected by it. So the more transparent, the better. And my second point is education. I think we've seen a whole lot of knowledge and education come through in terms of sustainability and measuring carbon footprints and looking at different ways of reducing waste. And it's important that you educate your staff and you educate yourselves as to what this actually means before sitting down and trying to create sort of sustainability plans and figuring out what direction the company is going to go in and your sustainability mission, because you need to have that core foundation of knowledge if you're going to understand the impact going forward.
Yeah, fantastic points there. You see, especially with sustainability and it being such I guess buzzword, that if you don't do that research and have that education, that's when you see the greenwashing take over or companies go the wrong path. So yeah, that's a really lovely points from both of you. Caitlyn or Quack, anything to add there?
I think just one thing I would add is, think beyond carbon offsets, think beyond just the frameworks, and I think look at insetting, which is basically just look at other ways you can support local initiatives, whether it's tree planting to enhance biodiversity or those sort of things. Actually think about beyond just carbon footprints, and a lot of that's really simple. And don't just use it as marketing, like actually do the mahi and then let that story be told from word of mouth.
I think it's sometimes wild having a hui with like a big corporate organization who's wanting to like connect with like rangatahi Māori to get their perspective on things, or to start up an initiative, or to like do some like creative work for a campaign to do that very said greenwashing. And then they turn up to the meeting in this huge Hilux with their big fancy, not the AirPods, the big Apple, big huge things, and 2 iPhones, and really expensive, and like expensive shoes, and they smell nice. And so I think if you're going to engage with rangatahi Māori, we come down to their level. You're going to their table, and so yeah, I think turning up in fancy stuff to put some type of power imbalance at play before you've even started talking. The other thing I wanted to say is that being a kaitiaki of the whenua is inherently a responsibility and a role of Māori. I believe wholeheartedly that all climate initiatives, all climate kaupapa, taking action against climate sustainable business, network things, it's all kaupapa Māori. And so not looking at your initiative and thinking, okay, how can we honour te tiriti through this work? But it's how can we make tangible steps to embodying kaupapa Māori in meaningful ways. You don't need to bring mana whenua to the table every time to look at your report, or to look at the design of your Google document, or to sense check Instagram posts that you're putting out. Māori organizations don't have much capacity as it is to sort of serve their people. So be really mindful about who you're inviting to the table. Awha koha, that's something that I found isn't not given out of disrespect, but organizations just don't recognize that that's what the process is. If mana whenua is sharing mātauranga with you, you offer them a koha and a kai and a kapiti. But yeah, those are the tangible things. Mauri ora.
Kia ora. Thank you, guys. I love that's a really nice place. We're going to open up to the audience in a moment, but some kind of threads I picked up from all that different stuff is, we know we're in this real emergency situation and we need to do the urgent work, but sometimes it's worth slowing down for a moment and doing the research, doing the thinking, so it's not tokenistic or just focused on buzzwords, whether that's from a more environmental point of view, so you're not greenwashing, or how you're turning up to these meetings, slowing down for a moment and thinking and putting yourself in the shoes of the people that you're trying to interact with is really important. And just before I open up to the audience, a shameless plug, SBN has many resource and training opportunities, so please get in touch if you do want to do some of that learning to then influence what you do in your business. So I'm going to open it up and hope that we have some really brave audience members who have some questions for our lovely panel of experts. Yeah, what a diverse and kind of excellent experience you all have in different ways. So please feel free to ask any questions. You can either pop them in the chat and I can read them out for you, or you can turn on your microphone and ask out loud. Hi, Caroline. You're on mute, just so you know. So if you want to pop yourself off, then we can hear you.
Kia ora. Thank you, Rangatahi. You are so awesome. So just really loved hearing from you all. And my question is, how can we adults, you know, older adults, how can we support you to be, you know, reach your potential, which is, to my mind, helping all of us. So that's my question.
Kia ora, thank you so much for being the first brave one. Who would like to start from our panel? Yeah, Quack, off you go.
Kia ora e hoa, kia ora whaia. I found it, and it depends on the type of initiative you're hosting, whether it's a business wanting to do something on the side, whether you're a climate organization, whether you've got limited resources and you just activate when it comes to like wānanga or different workshops. But it's very cliche, but I don't see it happen effectively very often. But before you host your wānanga, before you host your workshop, before you start looking at different initiatives for your business, I think really sitting down, maybe with someone who already has the skills in mātauranga, and reflecting on how you're going to engage with young people in a safe and culturally appropriate way, as well as how you're going to honour your responsibility as tangata whenua or tangata tiriti before you get to the workshop table. I think if you haven't got the time, and not you specifically, but if your kaupapa doesn't have the time to sit down and really reflect before the kaupapa on how you're going to do those things, then you don't have the resources to run the kaupapa full stop. The same way, if you don't have resources, whether it's putia, whether it's plants, whether it's flowers to give to the young people that you're working with, then you don't have resources to run the kaupapa. And exposure or being chucked on a social media page isn't the equivalent of koha. But I think all kaupapa should start and end with reflection. And it doesn't mean you have to come to the table with a 96-page te tiriti plan or a youth creative strategy. It can start really small and really basic, whether you've got a young person that you're aware of that wants to do this type of work and wants to have a leadership role, then bring them to the table and do some ideation or some dreaming with them. But leaving it up to the rangatahi to solely come up with the solutions without them understanding the framework of your organization, the intention of your organization, or the legal things of your charitable trust or business entity, it can be really difficult and really inaccessible. That's me.
Kia ora.
Anyone else from our panel want to answer that? Add anything on?
I do want to add just supporting rangatahi in your business as well. So like, I know as a rangatahi that wants to give time to my community, it is really difficult within a 40-hour week to do that. So if you can look for ways to, I don't know, give time to those rangatahi to do some skills development, to actually be a part of the community, because that's who they are of service to, and also likewise you are too. But you know, finding ways and spaces in their time to actually develop that as a leader, or you know, just to contribute to their local community in the ways that they want to.
Kia ora, Caitlyn. Anything else to add there, panel?
I guess I would say forming partnerships with rangatahi-led responses, and that doesn't necessarily mean financial partnerships. It could mean mentoring and offering insight into how your business or organization works. Sometimes it's just a really good learning opportunity, and there's a lot to be learned from both parties in that situation.
Yeah, that's a definite thing we see of getting businesses to, there are young people who really want opportunities to learn more, and so yeah, having that balanced with you learning from them and them learning from you is a really great way to go about it.
I did have one more thing I wanted to add, Ihua. I see a lot of, and also I was just reflecting on the word rangatahi and when it ends. I think it's my understanding that you're rangatahi until or unless you have tamariki of your own, and then when they have tamariki, then you're kaumātua. I don't know. It was a random learning I learned off this random auntie on TikTok. And the United Nations also says it's like 32. You're a youth up to 32. So all of the late 20s or early 30s, you're still rangatahi. I think I hear a lot of conversation from adults talking about not knowing where to like get that rangatahi voice. But from the last couple of days up here in Tāmaki, and albeit history, I think the best place to hear rangatahi voices are protests. We turn up in hordes of thousands of people talking about a wide range of issues. They're often speeches, you'll catch conversations as you're just walking in the street. But protests are such a beautiful way to stay engaged in the kaupapa. You don't have to have it align with you 100% of the time. But there's so much knowledge and wealth in mātauranga. That's where all the anger sits. We come to the streets because we've got no other option. And it's an opportunity for you to engage with our rangatahi instead of making them turn up to your fancy office in Ponsonby next to your Hilux and your fancy shoes and your fancy car. Mai ora.
Kia ora. And just so you see Quack in the chat, someone acknowledged that they were wondering about what defines rangatahi. So thank you for addressing that. We have a question in the chat from Phoebe who says, any advice for kicking off sustainability initiatives and climate action momentum quickly in organizations that are inherently slow? Who would like to kick off for that answer? Does anyone have any? Yeah, go for it, Caitlyn.
Yeah, I was going to say that often there are really immediate actions you can take. Like there is some really simple things, even just your waste strategy and waste systems. And I still see that as like a really big flag in a lot of businesses that's not properly done. And I think if the more small actions you can get people doing and get people actually without realizing accepting, the behavior change almost shifts the mindset. So, you know, it actually, the behavior that they're doing is reinforcing that greater decision making, and before they know it, they might be doing some more substantial changes. So just keep doing what you're doing and keep fighting the good fight, because I think that's really important.
Go
adding to that, I think there's a lot of value that comes with bringing people together and having them all in one space. So that can be setting up like lunchtime conversations. So you have people all together, everyone brings their lunch, and you get them talking about what's going on in the community, maybe highlighting some sort of community responses that are going on that you could maybe jump in and participate in. But it's having those continuous conversations. And there's also value in sort of setting up chains for like sharing resources within your organization. So, hey, I just saw this really cool article, sharing it around with everyone and just getting people thinking.
Yeah. I think that's probably a really good question from Phoebe. It's pretty hard to start sustainability initiatives or climate action in a workplace. And a lot of the time it feels like you start something and maybe a new initiative in your waste centre, but then that dies off really quick after a couple of months because everyone has their day-to-day. And, you know, the problem with that is if you keep trying to do initiatives and they keep dying off, then people get sick of it and people don't want to put any more effort into something that isn't working. My big piece of advice here is to establish your baseline and define what your needs are for your organization. You know, what are your sustainability goals? And that might seem like a really simple thing to say, but if you don't have that, then how are you going to know that your initiative that you're kicking off is actually a priority in your sustainability journey? So for us, you know, having a carbon footprint, a really comprehensive carbon footprint audit was a really established for us a baseline. Now I can use that and we can start understanding what our priorities will be to reduce our greenhouse gases. And then you can take that to your team. If you find a way to translate what that means to them in a way that's simple and they can understand, you're on your way.
Kia ora, Dylan. Really, yeah, I do work like that with quite a lot of businesses and agree with all of those sentiments. One thing I would add is figure out where that slowness is coming from. Is it that the wide staff engagement isn't happening and it doesn't feel like it fits in with people's day-to-day work? Is it sitting at a SLT level and they're saying that they support it, but then actively doing things that go against those sustainability plans? So if you can kind of find what corg, oh no, Phoebe says the board. That's a real tricky one, Phoebe. Yeah, lots of yeah, if you can identify that, then you can kind of target exactly what that's going to be. So from a board perspective, maybe that's sitting down and trying to understand what the priorities are that are stopping them. And then if you have that wide team engagement, maybe you could get a mass discussion from all those staff members at a board meeting and really demand from them, like, this is what we're all thinking, why are you putting these barriers in place, or why you know, and trying to have those more open conversations, because sometimes boards can, you know, sit quite removed from the everyday work. So bringing those two together could be a way to try and mitigate that. Great. Okay. We've used up our time, but that was really excellent, and I'm sure everyone's had lots to take away from that. And if you have further questions, you're welcome. I'll send out a email that kind of sums up some stuff, and feel free to reply with any questions or further resources you'd like shared with the group. We'll also have been recording this, so we will be popping it on YouTube. So if you found this useful, please feel free to share it with your wider networks, so we can all, yeah, get this message out wide. Panel, thank you so much. Really appreciate all your time and vulnerabilities and thoughts, and yeah, it's been such an interesting discussion. I'm sure people are going to take a lot away. Does anyone have anything they want to say to finish us up? No? Happy panel? That's what I want to hear. Cool. If you guys have any resources or call to actions you want to share, we can send those in links afterwards in an email as well. Lots of lovely sentiments from the chat there of people who've really enjoyed it. So yeah, kia ora everybody, and thank you so much. Please make sure to get out and vote if you haven't already, and we're just lovely to have you on board. Big heart from the SBN team in the room there. Oh, great. Thanks everybody. Ka kite, and we will reconnect over email.
Thanks everyone. Appreciate your time.
Ngā mihi nui. Ka kite.
Ka kite.